906 Outdoors is brought to you by Cooking Wild Seasonings. Make it fresh, make it yours. It's time for part 2 of our trip to the blacksmith shop.
So having made this axe head, I am now going to make a handle for it, make it a useful tool.
And a look at perch fishing on Lake Gogebic. 9 million acres of forest, 1,700 miles of continuous shoreline, 4,300 lakes, 12,000 miles of streams, more than 300 waterfalls, 15 counties, 2 time zones, and 1 area code. Welcome to the Upper Peninsula. Welcome to 906 Outdoors. Last week we watched as Marquette blacksmith Gordon Gearhart turned this ordinary torsion bar into an extraordinary usable tool. Tonight our hatchet gets a handle.
What I'm going to do here is heat this up to the critical temperature, which is the temperature at which the steel will harden in water or oil. In this case I'm using oil. It's a slower cooling material, and if the steel is water hardening and I harden it in oil, it won't break. But if it's an oil hardening steel and I harden it in water, there's a good chance that it could break. Nice bright red, cool it quickly in the oil. I won't cool it all the way down. I'll leave some heat in the body of the axe. Then I'll polish it up with a piece of sandpaper, and that would be the tempering process so that it relieves some of the stress made by the hardening. I'll just be hardening the cutting edge. And I'm just gauging the temperature of the steel by the color. The oil in the can is used fry oil from a local restaurant. Get a file and check that it's hard. As the heat is drying up into the polished edge, it's very faintly showing some colors here. There's some purple in there, and the closer to the edge it gets, it's less hot, so the color is more of a yellow. The colors are an indication of temperature, the blue being a hotter temperature than the yellow, which hasn't quite shown up yet. There's very faint yellow out there on the edge. And I'll put the body of the axe back in the fire, which will heat it up, and those colors will slowly migrate out towards the edge. There should be enough heat in the body of the axe now to bring that blue closer out to the edge. I don't want the edge to be too hard, but I don't want it to be real soft either. So by choosing what temperature I complete the cooling will determine how hard the edge is. So by hitting it with a file, I can get a rough idea of how hard it is. When it's right out of the hardening oil, the file skates off the surface. After it's tempered, there's a little bit of bite to the file, which tells me that it's lost some of its hardness, but still is hard to file, which means it will hold a good edge that'll be tough enough not to break. I'm scraping the surface scale off with the sandpaper down to the bare steel, giving it a bit of a polish, and that helps the tempering colors show up more dramatic.
Today's show is brought to you in part by Rapid River Knife Works, home of Michigan's largest custom knife factory showroom.
So having made this axe head, I am now going to make a handle for it, make it a useful tool. This is a handle I made previously. I'm going to use that as a sample just to get my shapes down. I'm starting with this piece of ironwood. I found in a friend's wood pile probably about 10 years ago, so it's been sitting around in the shop waiting for me to do something with it. I'm not going to make the handle as long as this one, but I'll use that as my general length. Probably take about 5 inches off. And I'm looking at the piece of wood just to see what the grain orientation is. This is not the ideal size for making a handle, but it is what I have available, so I'm going to use it. So my handle is going to come out of this area right here. I'm trying to stay away from the heartwood right there, and the grain runs this way. Ideally, I would want the grain running the length of the handle, but because of the diameter of this log, I'm not going to get that. So I'm just going to work with what I have. It's as much of an experiment as anything else. And being a piece of ironwood, I figure it's going to be tough enough to hold up for the work that this axe will be doing. I'm going to split this piece of wood, and if all goes well, it will leave me a straight piece of the wood to work with, or it will split crooked and I'll have to go find another piece of wood. Kind of determine what is the top or the back side of this by just looking at the grain. Put this as the back side. The philosophy behind my working with hand tools and my approach to woodworking is kind of like my approach to blacksmithing, chopping, hacking, as opposed to hammering. So I'm shaping with this big knife and doing it fairly crudely at this point. I don't have the machine tools that I could use to maybe more efficiently shape this piece of wood to start. Cut the shape out with a bandsaw, use drum sanders and everything else to do the final shaping. All of that is a possibility. It's just not really what I'm interested in at this point. Limited run production kind of lends itself to working with hand tools. I'm not real interested in doing hundreds or even thousands of axes. For me, doing 10 is about the maximum I want to do at one run. Short production runs keep me happy, satisfied, and interested. The saw cuts just help me to keep from running too far into the material I want to keep there. And now I won't be doing as much hacking. I'll just basically be splitting out those chunks between the saw cuts. Because I just very roughly sketched the outline of this without having an actual handle for a pattern, I've left a lot of extra material there so that I had enough to work with. And it goes back to the satisfaction I have of just shaping a piece of wood using this knife. There's something very meditative about chopping. I'm having a picture of where this is going and trying to make my hands take it there. And I'm at that point where if I take a little bit too much off, it will be ruined. I don't know how many handles I've made like this. Quite a few. Probably the first ones weren't very good and ended up as firewood. And it's a lot of paying attention to the size and how the wood is moving, which way the grain is going. And it makes it a little more difficult to carve when the grain runs off the edge. So I have to pay more attention to how I'm chopping, what direction the knife is going. I have a whole collection of axe heads that I've picked up over the years. They lose their handle and they're no good anymore, so they get thrown away. To me, they're sculptural artifacts. I just haven't figured out how to use them in a sculpture yet. There's a reason I cut that. That's so when I chop, I don't chop off that block that I want to leave there. So at this point with the handle, it's pretty much roughed out. I'll start cutting off the corners and it'll really start shaping up. The little notches that I'm cutting in help control how much wood I'm taking off on a given pass. They essentially become my line that I'm working to. As well as just hacking a handle out of a piece of wood, I'm also trying to make it the size that is proportional to the head. To my eye, it looks a little thick at this point, but I still have more wood to remove through filing and smoothing. I probably should be done chopping here, except for the end where the head will fit on. That I'll chop down close to size. So what I'm going to do is pencil the shape of the eye on the end of the wood, and that will give me a line to curve to. That's roughly it. I'll give a little extra so I don't curve way too much. I just take a very little bit off at first, cutting to that line. My goal is not to cut that off. Almost a handle.
906 Outdoors is brought to you in part by Blades Bait and Tackle, your hard water connection to Little Beatty Knock.
So I'll do the final shaping of the handle using a horse hoof rasp, and this will remove the wood quite quickly, and it gives me a lot more control than with the big knife. That way I won't take too much off too quickly. So I'll file this down until the head just fits on that very end. I'll put a pencil line on again, the goal being not to file the pencil line off. And then it should fit into the X-eye. I cut a slot in the end of the handle. This is where the wedge will be driven in to hold the head on the handle. I like repetition until I have mastered the procedure. And once I've mastered the procedure and done the production run to prove that it works, that's when I'm done producing. And I'll move on to another thing. Part of what I'm doing is self-explanatory to an extent, in that the actions I'm taking show immediate results, and why I'm doing what I do is to get that result. In this case, to make a rectangular board, basically, to make a handle from. And I'm just using this knife to do the rough shaping instead of running it through a planer or ordering a nice board from a wood company somewhere. Instead, I pulled a piece of wood out of a friend's firewood pile and turning it into a handle. So now I'm ready to start hanging the axe head. I'll just get it started a little bit, and that will leave some impressions in the wood, tells me where I need to remove more. All the spots that are marked dark are the areas where I need to file off some more wood. By filing that edge out, when I drive this handle out of the axe head, that'll prevent the slot from getting closed up to where I can't get a wedge in it. There we go. There's still some more work to do. I'll finish up this end here. There's a little bit of sanding to do. I'll smooth this all out, but for today, I think that will do it. I'll wedge the head on there and put a bit of an edge on it and chop something with it. Trim off that excess. Now I'll put a steel wedge in there. So this is not a factory-built wedge. This was one I made. I'll chisel some grooves in there to create some teeths that will hold into the wood. This is a piece of aluminum. It will somewhat keep the sharp edges on the steel because it's softer than the steel. So the teeth that are brought out of the edge from the chiseling will hold it better in the wood than without them. The steel wedge goes perpendicular to the wood wedge and the length of the handle. So the wood wedge spreads the top of the handle out to fill the hole. That hole is somewhat hourglass shaped, so it is bigger at the top than at the bottom. So when the wedge goes in, it pushes the wood to contact the metal on either side, and being bigger, it won't easily slide out. And the steel wedge just furthers the expansion of the wood handle. So using a chisel, I'll drive this steel wedge further into the wood. Using a ball peen hammer, the goal being to really lock the handle in to the eye of the axe. I'm going to do a little shaping on the very end of this handle now to make it look pretty. That part of it for me is closing the grain of the wood so that it's more durable and less likely to rot away because dirt and grease and water gets stuck in all those places. At the same time, they make better grip. Test number one. And it didn't fold over, so that's a good sign that it'll keep working. It works.
906 Outdoors is brought to you in part by L&M Fleet Supply, proudly serving the Northland for over 30 years. Lake Gogebic is the UP's largest natural inland body of water. I spent some time on the ice with Tim Long of Timbers Resort.
You know, a lot of local folks that fish Lake Gogebic, basically, you know, they have their shacks up on the north end of the lake in the bay, shallow area. It's weedy. We have a good walleye population in this lake, and they, you know, everyone is pretty much tip-up fishing out there. They're using sucker minnows or shiners or fatheads or whatever, but they're tip-up fishing. You know, big reason for that is because they have their permanent shacks set out there. They have to jack them up to get them off the ice because of the amount of snow that we get on this lake. Once you punch a hole there, and the ice is concave, once you punch a hole, the water comes up. So you got to keep the ice shacks jacked up in the air, and they don't want to have holes for jigging in their shacks because they'll have a flooded area. So they're basically all tip-up fishing, and it produces. It's a very good technique for guys to be out there walleye fishing. Low light conditions, you get a morning bite and an evening bite, and they're very successful doing that. Now when you're going to go perch fishing, you know, it's about using your electronics and being as mobile as possible. You can't just punch a hole and drop your line down there and be jigging blind. You have to use your electronics to see when the fish are coming in, at what level they're coming in, and then you adjust your jigging or your techniques or your size depending upon how the fish reacts to that. It was 20 below zero this morning, and it's probably around zero or maybe a little bit above right now. Otherwise, I would like to be out here, punch 100 holes and be fishing outside and bouncing around from hole to hole to hole to locate active fish or just locate fish on the screen. That's how I would prefer to do it. We got some pretty good wind out here, and it's darn cold, so we're sitting in the shacks and waiting for the fish to come to us.
This must be a male here. That's what jumbo perch is all about.
What you want for perch fishing is either a super ultralight or a noodle rod. You want that flex in there like this. You're not feeling the strike, you're seeing it with your rod tip. So you want a really light, flexible rod tip. A lot of guys are putting spring bobbers on here and they will extend off the tip of their rod there past the last eye, and they're super sensitive, so you'll see that just go down like that.
That's a nice fish. That's a nice fish.
Got another one?
Yep.
Come on, man. Nice job. But those big perch, they're coming up after these spoons. They're not really too intimidated. Although that last fish I caught, I had one or two come in before that. They came right up to it, looked at it, and went away. So then I downsized to a smaller jig, and it seemed to be the ticket. Look at that perch. Look at that perch. Oh my God. That was probably about a 13.5-inch perch, female. You know, I set the hook on it, and I had my drag set kind of light, so that's what we get on Lake Gogebic. As long as you're taking your time, bring that fish up relatively slow, they're gonna be fine to release. So I just dropped down to this smaller jig. I was using something a little bit more mammoth because of the size of these guys, girls. And this isn't even as big as they get. So this one is actually in real good shape because I took my time with her. She's just fine. She didn't blow her stomach. So this is a good spawning female. I'm gonna release this fish. Right down she goes.